Our second week. This is Heretical Weekends. We like to keep it fun and smart at the same time. I'm not sure if not sure if that's possible. I'll give you a clue. I'm the fun, not the smart. I am Mr. Heathen. With us today, Fox in the Know, who we actually get to see his face today, so which is
Hello, everybody. Yes, I've evolved. I've come from a non-purposive being, a fox, to a purposive being, a human, and I don't know how it happened. I've violated several logical principles. I'm investigating. I'm trying to find out. There might be someone who could possibly help me fill in that difficult problem.
You've violated the law of identity.
But he's not talking to me, so I'll just have to try and work it out for myself, I guess.
and of course the second or third person on our panel is Gavagai.
Hello.
Gavagai, give us a minute of your lovely voice and tell us what's going on.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I mean, are you talking about let you know what happened earlier this week between myself and Trey, or?
Whatever you want, but I definitely do want to talk about that Trey thing because he did mention me, so I feel I must respond.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in general, I'm doing good. I'm excited about the show today. I did have a chat that was kind of on a different topic with Trey, and it's on my channel if you want to check that out. But the topic was essentially, or supposed to be, the separation of church and state, and I was kind of puzzled by his take on it because it seemed it was a response to a post. That's how the whole thing started.
Mm.
And from his kind of interaction on that post thread, I took it that he was, didn't think that this was a legitimate thing, the separation of church and state. But in the discussion, it came out that he said he was, or indicated that he was in favor of it. And we had some differences, different views, possibly, on the perspectives of the American founding fathers, and what have you. And I won't bore. I know we have international both participants here with Fox and.
I do find it generally interesting, actually.
Okay, good. Well,
yeah, when I was at university, a good friend of mine was quite obsessed with American history, and he focused quite a lot on Thomas Paine, who obviously was actually British, and the British kind of liberal tradition that very very much influenced the founding fathers, which Trey didn't really talk about.
right.
I'm interested. So
Yeah.
go for it. Go for it.
Well, and I don't need to get into all of the founders and all that. That really wasn't even a big part of the conversation. The kind of the really curious thing about it was the fact that we ended up kind of going down this rabbit hole of value, and it kind of took us back to some of the same kinds of things that have popped up in other hangouts with Trey, where he's trying to claim that value can't come from something that didn't have value before, or that you have to have. I mean, it reminds me a lot of conversations that we've had with arcane logos and things, where or with Veckel on morality, which maybe this is a kind of pertinent to the topic today, but you can't. Their claim is that you almost have to have this kind of magical backdrop to make any kind of value claims, and even though they can't really substantiate any kind of facts about this magical backdrop, and there's disagreement all over the place about what it entails and how it manifests itself in reality and how we deal with it, but to say that it's not there, they think is some kind of violation, and completely. What's the word? It takes away any kind of claims that could be made about value.
So it's stupid, is what you're saying. His point is stupid. You can go ahead and say it. It's fine.
Well,
Yeah.
it doesn't. It's not persuasive to me because there's nothing tangible there that they can point to say this is what it is. But they insist that if you don't have it, you can't make claims. And then at the same time, any kind of claims that they try to make, about values and morality and things like that, there seem to be conflicts with their sacred texts or whatever. So and I'm sure we'll kind of touch more on that as we investigate this topic today.
Well, I like to say a couple of things about the whole Trey thing, then we can move on. And if I'm too long, just tell me to shut up. So Trey sort of mentioned.
I've got my own things. Sorry, I've got my own things to say about Trey as well. So we can all.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'll get off my chest and then move on, I think. So go ahead, sorry.
He did mention me briefly in the end, and I'll only speak on behalf of me, and I'll let Fox speak on behalf of himself. But he goes, I believe he said, he's a nice guy, but he doesn't understand the argument, which is essentially to me just attests to his overall his disingenuous nature, in the sense that he tries to come across as this humble guy, like we spoke about last time. I'm an amateur. I just read about this stuff. I'm interested in truth, and then he creates this gobbledygook of an argument, which, quite frankly, if I'm in good company if I don't understand the argument, because no one understands the argument. It's designed to befuddle, kind of like the precept, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's true.
But I think, you know what I mean. Put me in the same boat as every other person that you've spoken to in the past week. I mean, we've all had similar objections in one form or another. We probably verbalized it differently, but we could all see the flaws in the argument, and I'll put that in quotes. But I don't think it's any more of an argument than the precept is in size precept. I think this is Trey's version of the contingency argument. In this, I just can't take it. It's not persuasive. I can't take it seriously. And this idea that, well, I just don't get it is kind of a douche move. I don't know it's kind of a douchebag thing to do. So, I'm sorry, Fox, go ahead. And then Potato just came in the room, so we'll say hi to Potato.
Hi to Potato. It's good to have you. Yeah, so Trey this week really for me kind of graduated to being a kind of a fully fledged troll, because his conversations always seem to descend into this kind of incohesiveness and these one-line exchanges where you're constantly trying to get him to answer a question. And if you do actually give an explanation as to why you think there's something wrong with that particular point, you will just get another question thrown back at you. So I don't really see Trey as being someone who you can have an honest engagement with, which is a shame, because I think he does use as an act this nice guy facade. But as you say, essentially his argument isn't much better than a presuppositionalist. So at least a presuppositionalist is a little bit more honest. Trey carries around these bag of concepts and words which he kind of flings at the screen whenever someone brings up a point of serious objection. And I actually went to the trouble. I had a few hours spare this week to actually watch something of R.C. Sproul's kind of apologetic, teaching people to do apologetics. And I'm not saying that that's completely comprehensive of Sproul's work. But I didn't find it particularly good or interesting. I think some of the points he made about the Western tradition were a bit glib, and it's the classic case of theologian first, philosopher second. But you could definitely see the kind of the formulation of Trey's thinking. It was already a bad position to have, and he then copied it poorly. So you have this kind of doubly bad position. So he then just has the buzzwords that he's picked up from Sproul, and then he will then just use them when the superficial layer of understanding that he has kind of breaks and collapses, and then he'll just repeat these words, just ad nauseum. And one of the interesting things that actually came out of that particular course, and you can find it on YouTube. It's a bit long-winded, and it's kind of it's a lot of rubbish, to be honest. But one of the things that was interesting was when Sproul was talking with regards to Calvin about how, in the Calvinist tradition, which I think Trey belongs to, and I don't know a great deal about it, so I might be wrong, but Sproul said something along the lines of, well, only the Holy Spirit can enter your heart and make you believe, and words and reason are not going to do it. So the point of apologetics isn't to convince. We can do that all day long, and we'll never convince the unbelievers. The point is just to kind of shut them up, to stop them from kind of possibly leading other people astray. And I thought it was quite revealing, and I could kind of see, well, it's like kind of makes Calvin out to be kind of a, I think he was in the 17th century, 16th, 17th century troll. He was a forerunner of people like Trey, before the internet even got going. And Trey's taken that, I think, on board and has realised that he doesn't have to give an honest account of his arguments. He just has to have the appearance of a position and then kind of run it into the rocks, and then hopefully any kind of significant kind of criticism of it is just going to evaporate, or no one's going to kind of pay much attention to it. And I can kind of not abide that in someone. I think it's intellectually dishonest. And Trey has also been a little bit on the ad homs this week. I mean, we invited him as a right reply, which I strongly believe is a good thing to do. If we didn't slag him up too much last week, but we did say basically his arguments was a load of rubbish, and we kind of mistrust his motives, I guess. And so I offered it out there and I was sincere. I was genuinely sincere, and I'm not trying to somehow Trey accused me of wanting to be part of Hollywood or something like that, which is just ridiculous. Because I turned Hollywood down several years ago, So this is where I want to be. I don't want to be anywhere else. Although if there is a good script about Trey's story, I guess I could be persuaded for the right amount of money to come along and get involved. Maybe we could get someone to play Trey. I was trying to think who would get to play Trey. And I don't know, maybe Eddie Redmayne might be interested in doing it after his Stephen Hawking turn. The Theory of Gobbledygook could be the name of the film.
Amazing.
I'll just finish by saying, and he was very disparaging of Mischievous Heathen and Atheological Potato, basically saying, I did say to him, I said, look, we'll treat you with respect if you come into this room. We'll allow you to say what you want to say. And we'll I think it'll be a way of bringing forward your argument, because someone can then say, can I just pick you up on that particular point? Can you explain that? And he can address a wide range of his critics in one move, and that would be beneficial for him. And I could understand if there was some anxiety about it. If in private he expressed that that's just not what he wanted to do, but completely ignored the challenge. And then just kind of said, I'm only interested in speaking to Gavagai or you, Fox. I'm not interested in speaking to Atheological Potato or Mischievous Heathen because they don't know what they're talking about, which is just, ridiculous. And it's quite rude to just dismiss people who are actually more than capable of dismantling, half asleep his argument. I just thought it was really rude and unnecessary, and kind of shows how far the good guy act goes. And that's to say nothing of his argument. I mean, there are people, who are knobheads basically, but make good arguments. But Trey doesn't make good arguments. So he can't then go around acting as if he's in a position of authority and then just patronising atheists, which is what he does in his threads recently. Have just been, come on class, let's get this together, and how can I spell this out to you, and how am I the only one who understands it? And it's really childish, and it doesn't do him any credit. So really, Trey, you should go up. And if you do still want to talk to us, we will try to remain as neutral and as respectful as possible, and we'll give you the opportunity. But beyond that, I'm not interested in these one-to-one hangouts where it's Groundhog Day and we repeat the same crap again and again and again. So that's kind of my take on it. So.
Does anybody think it's ironic that the guy that accused you of being Hollywood is the guy that tries to pimp himself out to every hangout imaginable? Like, he's the guy that's been trying, like, you know what I mean? Like, he's been like challenging everybody to get online as much as possible, and he's accusing you of that. So, anyway, we got Potato and we got Adam Elliott, which is we haven't met him yet, so we'll see about Adam when he gets after we talk to Potato, who, if you recall last week, didn't have a working mic, so we were his mouthpiece. So,
hello, can you hear me?
Wow.
Yeah, whoa, yeah.
Okay, I guess that works.
A lot better.
But, I go by Atheological Potato. Thanks for invitation. And I apologize for advance of my terrible English accent. And I have to say that I don't consider myself to be any kind of expert since I lack academic education. But I consider philosophy to be a serious hobby, if that makes any sense. And all the subjects regarding the great debate are of great interest for me. So I hope that we can expand knowledge and regarding those subjects. Thanks.
All right. Adam is in the room now. I don't know Adam. Is he a friend of somebody else's? Because he sort of just popped into our thread that we were typing back and forth. So I assume he knows somebody.
Well, I'm not relatively new, but I think I might have seen him commenting on a few threads.
Yeah. Adam.
Good to have him.
Hey, what's going on? Can you hear me?
Ben, how are you?
Not bad. How you guys doing?
Pretty good. I saw you pop into some messaging that was going on back and forth between Potato and Fox and the guy. I just assumed that you were a friend of somebody's because I thought that it was like a private PM thing. But you were here, so.
Excuse me. No, Trey Jedlow did his scientific proof for God on Facebook on one of the atheist first Christian sites. Yeah, and I went with it through him, and eventually he was, became so belligerent and rude in his comments that he got kicked off of it. So I was interested in it because even though it's horse shit, I still wanted to go through it thoroughly with him, see what he was coming from, and followed him onto Google Hangout. But he wants no part of a discussion with me.
Yeah, he completely ignores me now. There are a few like ongoing kind of rumbling threads that I initially contributed to, and he did respond to me, but he kind of he's given up responding now. So I will still respond to his nonsense so that any third party could see my take on it, but Trey will not directly address them. So that's fine. I take that as a sign of he's unable to respond correctly to what I've said. I don't suggest that everything I say is necessarily always correct. He's more than welcome to challenge me on it, and if I'm wrong, then I'll accept that. But that's something that I have that Trey completely lacks. He's incapable. I mean, he's a self-confessed layman. So you're going to make mistakes. There's still lots of philosophical terms which I've either half forgotten or never knew. So why is there this kind of big thing of an inability, to say that you're wrong about something? We're all here. We're not professionals. We're not getting paid for this. There's a small audience, actually, of relatively kind of interested people who have probably been in a similar situation. So they're more than willing to accept error and say that doesn't mean that you're completely wrong about everything. And I'm not the kind of person who would jump up and down and go, "Ha, you didn't know what that term meant." I think that's childish. So that's probably pretty much everything I have to say about Troy. I don't know if anyone else does, but it's probably not much point talking to him.
Yeah, I mean,
anyway, so F him.
His argument is it's pretty old. It's the prime mover argument. He just words it differently and tries to put a lot of complicated and overly ridiculous terminology in his argument, but it's the same prime mover thing. It's been around for hundreds of years, if not thousands.
Yep.
Yeah, but do you happen?
Exactly.
One of the other things he does is he when you ask him a really, really on-point question, he just answers with another question. Like, he doesn't really address,
Yeah, it's disingenuous apologetics.
But I don't. It's been 20 minutes. Are we done with Trey? Does anyone else have anything else to say about the guy?
I'm done.
He's just begging for attention, that guy. So we have. I'm getting blown up here on my phone. I don't know if you guys can see me. I keep looking over, but we're getting a lot of bumps or a lot of hits too for people to join. Whether they do or not, I don't know. But I think we should at least get on the morality topic since that's what we proposed.
Yeah.
Potato had a specific interest in this last week. Potato, do you have any particular area of morality you want to get into?
Well, nothing specific. But I can talk about divine command theory, if you guys want.
Yeah, sounds good.
Oh, good. You just encompassed, all of Christian morality in one sentence. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's so true. They don't seem to have anything else than divine command theory and well, perhaps virtue ethics, some old Aristotelian notion, but basically that's it. I mean, it's so ironic that religious people often accuse atheists of not having cogent moral system. But the funny thing is that is really other way around, because what do they have? They have nothing. I mean, all the ethical systems are secular. Deontology and utilitarianism and well, basically any system, it is secular. And only thing that they really have is divine command theory, and it is so flawed. I mean, we can go there if you guys want.
I have a question about it.
Go ahead.
Have they ever come up with a way out of the Euphyphero problem?
I don't think there's a satisfactory way out of it myself.
Yeah.
It's usually to kind of imply that God's nature is just good, and which would then seem to suggest that it is in some sense kind of subjective. You know, it's inherent in the nature of a particular being.
Right.
The question then is, well, could God then change either in his nature or change his nature such that it could be different? And usually that reply is no, of course he can't. How can God change his nature? That's not logical, and so on. Which would seem to be then a limit on God's nature. And if that is that limit in and of itself subject to God's will, or is it not? And why? There seems to be another question that you can ask with that. And however you try to kind of split the horns and kind of find a way out of the dilemma, you can then seemingly still ask another question. Is that either down to God, or is that something that God has imposed on him? And I've never really heard a satisfactory outcome. And I think generally what happens is it just blindsides people. People will just say, okay, well, yeah, right, it's just his nature's good, and what God is goodness. God is perfectly good, or maximally good, or whatever else it is. So I don't personally find it particularly a satisfying answer. But divine command theory is one of those subjects which you will get theologically minded philosophers try to patch it up, and so it will run and run and run. So the latest literature on it will probably have found some way around that particular problem. So it's very hard, and then someone else will come and counter that point and say what seems like an intuitive and plausible position. It's a little bit like the Kalam or other cosmological arguments. You buy into them, they seem kind of intuitive and make sense. Then someone raises an objection to it, and then there's a counter objection, and then a counter objection, and so on and so on and so on, until these things kind of become quite bloated and don't retain that intuitiveness anymore. And even then, there's never really a settled state in which you can say for sure that that's a sound position to take. So you can do that. I think it's a bit of a fool's errand, and I think it's kind of unnecessary. But generally speaking, I think the dilemma is valid and hasn't really got a satisfactory outcome.
See what the problem, Fox. It's funny that you bring that up because I have the same exact objections you do. I mean, and you're 100% right. I have even trouble getting past when someone says God's nature is good. What does that even mean? I mean, that is language that we don't, as humans, or as I at least don't understand what that even means. To say God is good, or God is love, or God is justice, or His nature. These seem like things that people say when, like you were saying, you counter their argument, and they kind of patch it up. It's almost like a dam that has leaks, and they're kind of just sticking their fingers in it as they go. But no, you bring up a good point. But I've pressed to Christians on what does that even mean, and they just kind of go, well, it's good. He's good because he's good, and then they kind of realize that what they just said is stupid. But anyone have an opinion on that?
I would just say, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask, we've mentioned the Euthyphro dilemma. Do we want to provide a quick summary of what that is and where it comes from?
Go ahead if you want to.
Sure. So the Euthyphro dilemma is from one of Plato's dialogues, and it's basically a conversation between Socrates and this guy Euthyphro. And without getting into too much detail, the bottom line is by dilemma it means not like a crisis or a problem, but kind of a split, a choice. You have basically it's two prongs, right? There's either morality basically consists of whatever the deity says, and it's only based on the fact that the deity has commanded it, that it makes it good. And so he could say, in the problem with that prong of the dilemma is that nothing is inherently good or evil in and of itself. It's only based on basically the subjective whim of this deity. Or the alternative is that good is something else that's out there, and that the deity only kind of gives commands that are aligned with whatever this good is, and so the problem there is, does it take away from the deity's power, or kind of divine nature in some sense, because he's subject then to whatever is good. Does that sum it up sufficiently?
Yes,
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. And I think the reason why it's relevant to the kind of the debate with theists, particularly Christians at the moment, is because I think they try to claim morality as a kind of a trump card. It's something that theism has that atheists will have to try very, very hard to kind of cobble together various bits and pieces of kind of secular ethics to come up with something which it still could be riddled with holes and objections. But if something is just if something just comes from God, if something is good because God says it's good, then that's really simple, that's really easy to follow and kind of quite intuitive. It's prescriptive ethics, which it basically deals with what we ought to do. Well, we ought to do this because God says so. We don't really have to kind of worry much about it. And I always think it's quite a simplistic way of doing ethics, and I don't particularly like it because it almost turns you into an automaton. It means there is this supreme moral standard, and he says do this, do X, do Y, do Z in these particular circumstances, and then if you do them, or you don't do them, and if you don't do them, there's a punishment. If you do them, you're doing something which is morally good, and there isn't any kind of significant role for moral judgment. And to me, morality as a faculty is quite an important way for me to think about morality. And if there's a situation where I'm not sure what the best course of action to do is, I try and have a think about it, and I kind of try to think through things and try to weigh things up. And sometimes I will think I'll be quite happy with the decisions I make. Other times I don't. But for me, that's not a major issue. But theists seem to think that doing that kind of morality for most people will just not be an attractive option. So there is this cell of, well, if you're a theist, and I think whenever a theist brings up moral arguments as an example for or a proof for the existence of God, I can always think, why are you bringing up a preference of, wouldn't it be nice if this was the case, rather than this is the case? And there's something quite insidious about introducing that into the debate, I think, because you've already moved away from trying to prove objective reality as this to, well, if there isn't a God, then there are no objective truths, and everything suddenly becomes relative, and anyone could do anything, and immoralism rules. And it's a kind of a scare tactic, and it's a problematic that they want you to buy into. So it's nothing to do with how things actually are, because it might be that there are no objective truths and there is no God, and then we have to kind of try and find out the best way of interacting with each other and being as moral as we can, because it seems like we have to do that. It seems there's a need to do that, and none of that goes away if tomorrow you wake up and you read your paper and God does not exist. You're not going to go and slit your throat if your partner or you kill your children. You're not going to do that, and there's a reason why, and that needs to be explained and described. And we also need to know, well, if we've removed those kind of moral imperatives, should we replace them with new ones? And I think that's a debate that theists try to sidestep because it's quite tricky and it's quite difficult, and there are no easy answers necessarily, and offer you a kind of a, well, this is an easy answer. Wouldn't you rather this be the case? And I think it's probably one of the more convincing reasons for people to maintain some link to religion. So it's not effective in terms of proving anything because it's not a proof, but it is effective in convincing people. So I think that's quite an interesting aspect of the debate.
Is there anyone here who doesn't think morality is subjective?
I don't think it's subjective in the sense that we all just basically get to decide. I mean, I would say that for mankind, that there is some kind of way that we are, essentially, based on biology, based on evolution, and that because of that, and because of our capacity to reason, there are certain things that just rationally make sense about the way that we would construct our society, and things that would be counter to that biological nature and to our biological goals of existing and having, promoting things that contribute to our well-being as a society. And then there are things that are clearly counter and contrary to advancing those goals. And so to me, I think that we can say that there are some kind of standards that exist, not in an objective, concrete way that we could say, like this is a pen, and we can cut it up and measure it and things, but that there are kind of rules that just basically fall out from reason and our essential beings, that have kind of come about through the process of evolution.
If I could say about relativism and realism, I mean, I am ontological anti-realist regarding moral properties, but the realist in a sense that moral judgments or moral semantics report non-cognitive attitudes that can be true or false, even though moral predicate does not express moral properties. I think this is called quasi-realism, and David Hume had somewhat similar ideas, but that is a bit controversial among Hume scholars. But anyway, it is possible to be realist and relativist in the same time. It is not either-or situation.
Yeah, this is one of the things actually about ethics. When I did my degree in philosophy, I really didn't like ethics. I tried to avoid it as long as possible because it just seemed to me that kind of pointless, because we spend all this time trying to find out moral truths and effective moral systems, and then outside of the philosophy class, everybody seems to be acting in a way which is pretty much how you would expect, and it seems good enough to kind of behave towards each other. So I think there is separating out the meta-ethical debate and then kind of a descriptivist account of why people behave the way they do. And when I was thinking about this topic this week, two things kind of sprung to my mind, which is, firstly was, well, look at the kind of beings that we are, and not just in evolutionary terms, which I do think is very illuminating, but look at in terms of how we develop as subjects and where we come from. We come from kind of an intersubjective relationship. We before we become individuals, we in a Freudian sense emerge from this kind of intersubjective field. We figure things out. We figure out rules and taboos and things like the ideal identity that we should try to emulate. These kind of things, and we're orientated towards other people before we're even who we are ourselves. So I think that's quite an interesting way of looking at it, because you sometimes get this view of human beings as being and I think atheism does kind of have some people like Richard Dawkins, for instance, with his selfish gene hypothesis. I know it's partly a metaphor, but also this idea that we are just selfish automatons that are trying to, just procreate and spread our genes doesn't really do justice to the kind of beings that we are and how we develop as individuals. So that was one of the things I thought of. And secondly, one of the things I thought of was I'm kind of suspicious about morality anyway, following on from Nietzsche, because morality often isn't a good thing. It isn't necessarily obviously the case that morality is good. People do lots of what I consider bad things in the name of morality, and they say that they have moral justification. And so we should be cautious about this drive, this push towards a perfect moral system. We should want our morals to have some degree of plasticity, and should be able to sorry, it's quite distracted the wrong. We should be able to kind of keep the door open on ethics and not close it shut, which is what a lot of theists would like to do. And I don't consider the meta-ethical argument we have about what is good, what should we do in terms of moral imperatives and prescriptive ethics. I think this debate in genuine is an ethical position in and of itself, and it's a good one to have because it prevents the totalization of the kind of ethical field, so that it's completely closed and we have this system where then we just become robots and we just obey the system of ethical commands and that's it. Because I don't think we can ever have a perfect system, because people change, relations change, so it's to me suspicious, this kind of urge to have a kind of a perfect moral system.
Yeah. Hey man.
Unity from diversity.
Can you guys hear me?
We can. I want to introduce have Floyd and Tara introduce themselves real quick. I've never seen Floyd be so quiet for so long, so I just want to make sure he doesn't explode. We kind of have a loose conversation going on morality. Potato brought up divine command theory. We all kind of gave our opinions. I want Floyd to say a piece here on morality. Pretty much anything that you want to talk about can bug you, and then throw it over to Tara when you're done.
Yeah, I'd like to add, when theists say to us, "Oh, without God, you can't have goodness or objective morality, or we can't have value, or things like that," and they bring up philosophical problems about that. It's like, oh, well, not everyone agrees with each other. We're just made of matter and stuff like that. All that's fallacy of composition and stuff like that. But the question I want to throw back to them is, how do we have those things with God? They'll always bring up the negative aspects of naturalism, assuming that theism solves those problems. But I think we should press them. How does God existing give us subjective morality or give us values and so forth? It's pretty empty, when they say, "Oh, well, God is goodness." It's pretty much a circular tautology, which offers no new information. If you say God is good, and goodness is what comports to the nature of God, what did you actually say about the nature of God, and what did you actually say about goodness? You said nothing about neither. I actually argued this in one of the debates I had. I made the analogy. Jones has the property of crespigliness, and crespigliness is what comports to the nature of Jones. Now, what did I actually say about Jones, and what did I say about what crespigliness is? Nothing, right? So that's what they're doing when they say, God is, God's nature is good. A single argument is like, if you say, if you ask, why is fire hot? And I say, oh, well, the reason why fire is hot is because it's heat-emitting nature. Okay, so what I basically said is, fire is hot because fire is hot. I really didn't say anything at all, and that's what they're doing as well. I remember William Lane Craig gave a lecture on that. Only life has meaning only if there's an afterlife with God. And he pointed out, well, if without God, having the afterlife would still be meaningless because it would be boring, right? It would just be the same thing over and over and over again, which could very much be true, right? But again, how does God coming in the picture solve this problem? It really doesn't. They just keep on showing the negative aspects of naturalism, but again, they don't show how theism actually can solve these problems.
Yeah, I agree.
with that.
I made a similar comment, but it wasn't nearly as eloquent as how you put it. When somebody says God is good, I was saying I don't even know what that even means. Like, you don't really. It's really a contentless comment.
It's redundant.
Right.
It's a redundant piece of terminology. It's you could say it has some kind of use within language because it emphasizes how you are feeling. You know, it's saying, well, yeah, you know, I just think it's really wrong to kind of, you know, kill people. You're indicating how strongly you think about that, but it doesn't actually tell you anything about whether or not it's wrong to kill people. You have to do some justification work to say why you think that. And usually people, you know, who are brought up in your kind of culture will share similar moral values. So it's a way of it's kind of an epistemic shortcut to saying, well, you know, the thing that we both believe, the thing that we both accept, the standards that we generally hold together, this is where I stand in relation to those standards. And so it's a piece of it emphasizes you know, how you stand towards a particular position, but in and of itself, it could seem to have, you know, a value which we then have to go out and look in the world. And it can be really difficult and mystifying process to think that goodness hovers around things and so does evil. I have no reason to think it does. I think it's a completely redundant piece of terminology, and it's just an artifact of language in many respects. But you know, that's quite a controversial point, I guess.
I concur. Kara, what say you?
Well, hi. I haven't met some of you, so hello. For me, with morality, I always thought that it varies. It's very fluid, but I think every single person is born with some kind of just general idea that some things are wrong and some things are right. And if they don't have that general process that they're born with, then there's miswires. I think that I truly think that conscience came first, then God came later as an explanation for that conscience, when really it's just conscience is common sense, empathetic common sense. When you see someone that you've hurt, you feel guilty, you don't want to do that again, so that's wrong. To me, it just seems like it's evolutionary common sense that we've mistakenly labeled as some kind of sky daddy, and I think it does a poor. I think it's not giving ourselves enough credit that we know what's right and wrong. I just think that needing somebody to tell us how to be right and wrong instead of just using our own brains and how we react with other people, it just seems absolutely contradictory to me. And I don't understand how the religious do it. I don't get it. I don't know how they do it.
One of the things
why we're here.
is the ridiculous scenarios that always get thrown out.
Oh, I know.
Where they seem to be saying, well, you want to be able to say that's wrong, don't you? But how can it be wrong if? And then they'll give you this ridiculous, usually something like baby rape or something like that. Where don't you just think that's absolutely wrong? And it may be that as a result of this, you know, of a moral kind of a proper interrogation of our ethical systems, we lose the capacity to say it is absolutely objectively true for all time and all situations that, you know, X is wrong. And I can kind of live with that because everything else about who I am and the society I've been brought up in and my objective capacity to reason about things tells me X is wrong. I can say that. And I don't need to appeal to anything else. But theists constantly suggest that we do, or else we'll lose the debate. And therefore, there's this ridiculous dichotomy of either you have an absolute, it's a little bit like, it's quite a lot like the presuppositionalist debate. Either you have absolute standards of truth or goodness or what is right, what is morally correct thing to do, or you have nothing, and you're just degenerate, and you have no truth, and you have no kind of ethical standards to anything. And I just think that that's kind of really facetious position to hold, and kind of
Drives me batshit.
Yeah.
I think they're overlooking something too. I'm sorry, go ahead, Terry.
I just have a quick thing about that. It just drives me batshit when theists are like, oh, so when they're asked, do you do all these good things for God? If God didn't exist, would you stop doing good things? And they say, yes, what's the point in living? I think that is completely horrible, and I feel sorry for those people because as somebody atheistic, I actually value life more because of it. I value it way more because there's just everything is just so fragile. That's to me. I don't get it. I don't get how religious people can say, "Oh, no God, let's go rape people." No, that's not. That's just stupid. Ugh. And that's not how we act.
I kind of think of it this way: when people get bogged down in answering the baby rape questions and all that stuff, and when discussing like theists' objective morality or whatever, absolute morality or whatever they're claiming, they'll often, as you guys previously stated, they'll bust out some stupid question like, well, is it always wrong to rape a baby? And what they're doing is they're in essence, I would say, like, so, I wouldn't say shifting the burden of proof, but I would say they're deflecting, because the topic isn't. The topic should be, we need to establish that this absolute morality even exists to begin with. So that, I mean, I think the whole idea of them, asking the baby rape questions, the extreme questions, it's just a way of deflecting the scrutinization back on, us, this infant. It's a diversionary tactic. I think we need to hold their feet to the fire a little more, because I'm not going to grant them an absolute morality. I'm going to want them to demonstrate it before I answer anything.
I think it's interesting actually how the parallels to kind of presuppositionalism run quite deep, because again there is this assumption of an absolute standard of truth, and if you don't have it, then you don't have truth at all. It's the only game in town scenario, and it's the same with morality. If you don't have God, then you can't have morals. If you don't have God, then you can't have truth. If you don't have God, then you can't have the laws of logic. It's always this appeal to authority, as if unless something is grounded, and that this is the only way to build a system, unless it's grounded in something which is immovable and unchanging and absolute, then your system will automatically fall apart, and that is just ridiculous, because something happened tomorrow, like I say, where everyone accepted that God does not exist. We would still have debates about what is true and what's not in relation to some epistemic standards. We would still have a debate about what is good and what is wrong in relation to some particular standard, and we do this all the time. And religion, to quite a significant extent, is parasitic on a basic sense of right and wrong, or social kinship interaction, that kind of thing. The development of the ego and the superego, of the kind of subjective beings that we are. We have all that in place, and then religion comes along and takes basically credit for it by saying, oh, it only exists because God exists, and if you take away God, then you automatically collapse into relativism, whether it be epistemic relativism or moral relativism, whatever it is. And we should be more forthright in saying, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to automatically assume that what we're doing when we're doing epistemology, or what we're doing when we're doing ethics, is to this particular goal, this particular standard. That's up for debate. That's a part of the meta-ethic or the meta-theory of truth. So it's up for grabs, and if it turns out we can't do it properly without God, then we should see if we can do it another way. Because of course the elephant in the room is that we don't know that God exists. So we make these appeals to God, but we don't know if we're doing if it's the right God. We don't know if there are more than one of them, or if he's actually immoral, evil. We don't know if so we have to find a way out without relying on something which we haven't proved. If we can prove God exists, then we can come back to it with a fresh pair of eyes. But as it stands, these are used as proofs to get you to God. But they only really work if you've already got that. So I just kind of I think it's a little bit ridiculous.
That was my point too, but again, you said it much better than I did.
Yeah, that is good. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just agreeing. Sorry.
Oh, yeah, that was good point. That is divine command theory a meta-ethical theory or a normative theory? But I think that um, it is definite that it is the ontological moral theory. Um, but trying to answer to the question that what is the nature of the intrinsic good? And in deontology, it is seen as a duty. So a duty for divine command theories is, of course, that duty to do the will of God, since that is by definition intrinsic good. It is very Kantian notion.
It's hard to ascertain whether or not good is innate, or if it's learned, or if there is a small bit of it that's innate, but it can be overridden. I don't have the answers to that either. It's kind of it's that gray area that gets me stuck.
Well, the problem, the scary part for me is that when people subscribe to these absolute moralities or divine command theory, a lot of times they have it in their head, or at least in my experience, most of the time, that they can't be wrong. And so when you have someone that has such rigid morality, and they feel that they can't be wrong because it's divine, it leads to all sorts of messed up stuff happening in the world, essentially. And it closes them off from learning. It closes them off, there's just this sociological domino effect. It's just kind of a hamstring on progress, at least to me.
Yeah, it sends us backwards consulting these ancient texts that were irrelevant even after they were written, even after they were written. I just don't understand that either. Why is it if it's older, it's better in terms of religion? But with science, we just keep growing and growing and growing and growing. I don't get it.
It works with fashion. My girlfriend buys all sorts of clothes, and she spends more money, and they call it vintage. So maybe old is better.
Vintage is cheap.
I was going to say, this has kind of been alluded to already, but the idea that if a god commands and it's just basically whatever he wills is good. If you are convinced that you are hearing from a deity and all goodness is derived from the deity, then and there's nothing that's off the table, because clearly the deity can command you to kill your own son. He apparently did it himself, right? And there's this woman, Andrea Yates, who several years ago drowned all her children in a bathtub, right? Mm-hmm. If divine command theory is true, and she actually heard from a deity, then she did the absolute best thing, and if she had not done that, she would have been doing something evil. So there's really no way to even criticize, because we don't have access to what she's experienced, right? Well, no more than we do to Abraham and the command that he got supposedly to sacrifice his son Isaac. So this doesn't give us any kind of tangible insight whatsoever. There's no way we can even criticize, because we don't have access to that person's experience.
Yeah, perhaps she was appealing to the inner witness of the Holy Spirit, like William Lane Craig does.
That's another thing. That's why I think religion is just so deeply personal, because every single person sees it differently. That's why there's so many different denominations. I don't see a problem if it's personal, like if it's private practice or something. But when you start involving other people, when you start affecting other people's lives to the point of your morality that you see, and it starts actually being incredibly harmful to those people who don't share your views, I have a problem with that. And that to me is immoral.
Is I don't know if anyone's familiar with, there's a quote from Dostoevsky which says something along the lines of, without God or immortal life, then all things are possible. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that term, but basically, sorry.
No, please.
Well, basically, it's making up the argument that if we don't have God, then we basically, we can't be moral, and so anybody can do anything, and there's no moral imperative for them to not do it. But I think that position's wrong, and I think actually the reverse, if anything, is correct. I think it was Jacques Lacan actually who said something along the lines of, if God is dead, then nothing is permissible. And I think that's actually a pretty good position to be in, because if we can't then go ahead assuming, as people in ISIS do, that what we're doing is absolutely right, we have to stop and think and go, actually, I can't appeal to an external authority to get me to where I think I might want to go. So I have to then make some kind of justificatory case for it. And if you do it, and everyone else says that's crazy, that's wrong, that seems wrong to me, there's a flaw in your justification, then someone could go ahead and do it, but they can't claim to do it with, consistently with any kind of justification. So I think that actually, if we say God is dead and nothing is permissible, then we get away from this position of saying, well, this is just wrong. It's just wrong that for gay people to get married, that kind of thing. These things are just wrong. I roll my eyes whenever I hear someone say that. I think, well, it might be wrong. Well, explain to me why you think it is, and then I will judge that person's case. And if I find it, worthy of adopting, then I might agree with them. But generally speaking, I won't be. And I think what morality allows people to do is, particularly these old-fashioned primitive beliefs, this backward morality which wasn't very moral when it was around in the first place, it allows them to kind of get that across the line because it's backed up by this big guy sat on a cloud and he's supremely powerful. And, well, yeah, I might disagree with it. And there are plenty of theists who'll say, well, they'll twist and they'll turn and they'll actually think slavery is wrong, or I kind of gay people seem kind of nice to me and maybe they should be allowed to get married. But no, they can't, because the authority figure tells me that's not allowed. So when you break that away, yeah, you might put in a position where all of a sudden you're not particularly sure what to do, but you'll probably very quickly start to realize there are different reasons for why you might think a certain way or might want to act a certain way, and there are other ways to justify it without just appealing to an authority figure, which is basically what this does.
That's incredibly put, and that is just incredible, and I totally agree with that. And yeah,
that's why we invite him, Tara, because he says stuff like that.
Well, and that's I'm glad I'm here, because it's so great and refreshing to hear this stuff, and to be able to say, oh my gosh, thank goodness I'm not alone on this, on the way that my brain is wired, and I knew I wouldn't regret this, and I'm so glad I met you all today.
Good time.
Like, I've seen you guys in other hangouts and stuff like that, but this is the first time I've met you, and I no regrets. Already I'm just like, yes.
Nice.
If I could send cupcakes, I would.
Oh, well, that's the case.
Might be a bit stale in the past, I think. But...
So we're about at the 1 hour mark. We generally keep the show, I think, about an hour, maybe a little bit, like a few minutes after the hour. I know Fox tends to have things to do. I tend to have things to do.
You have lives? What's that like?
Yeah, we have lives outside of Google. And
what's that like?
Normally last week what we did was we did a pass-through of everyone in the panel to get their final opinion, kind of. Are we okay with that? And then we kind of have a quick chat on next week.
Sounds great.
Going. So, Adam, you've been quiet the longest, so I'm going to throw it to you, then Floyd, let's just go across the room.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, I had some technical difficulties. I missed a little bit of what you guys were saying, but I think if you say things are good because they're commanded by God, then you're subject completely to his whim. And if he ever tells you to throw a baby against a rock, I mean, you can't say that that's a bad thing. And that puts you in a sticky situation as a human being, because most people would, just say that that's a horrific thing. Another thing is, if you say things are only good because they're commanded by God, then every moral question that's ever been asked, does God have an opinion on it? Is every single one of them in the Bible? Otherwise, you're interpreting them however you want. You're saying, well, God would say this, instead of having your own opinion about things. Or what we should all say is, you should increase health, happiness, decrease unnecessary suffering. And there's questions, I heard a couple of you guys mention slavery. I mean, yeah, of course we all think today in 2015 that's horrible, but you can't get that type of morality out of the Bible. And that's my thoughts.
Okay, Floyd, knock us dead.
Yeah, when someone asks, is something good? I think we need to ask, good for what? I'll just leave you at that.
That's nice.
God's glory, duh.
Checkmate.
All right, Fox. Wow us with your wisdom.
I think my wisdom levels have depleted over the hour. Well,
Oh, I'm sorry for that.
I would just say that I do strongly think that the way that morality is used as a weapon by a lot of theists on G+, it does them no real good, and it's not to their benefit at all. I think because I think having the debate itself is a part of being an ethical being. I think, and they seem to constantly assume that they've got it right, they've got it sorted. They know what's going on. They've got all of this worked out, and no one can come at them. And whenever you try to poke holes in things like divine command theory, there's always some ad hoc rationalization that doesn't quite fit. And the hope is that they've done enough to kind of throw you off the trail. I don't buy it, and I think if they want to talk about immorality in terms of God, and they want to go on the record of the God of the Bible, we can pick at that all day and say why we think that's wrong. And ultimately, they're just going to say, well, you don't have an absolute standard, so deal with it, and until you can get back to us and show us what an absolute moral standard is in an atheistic worldview, then you can't speak to me about morals, and therefore everything that my God does or says that you think is immoral isn't, because he says it, and that's just the way it is. It's just childish. It's contrition of moral judgment, I think, and moral responsibility, and I think that's bad, and I don't like to see that. So I always try to hopefully encourage people to wake up those instinctive kind of natural faculties, which I think are there in most people. Not everybody. Some people are psychopaths and sociopaths, and there's quite a few of those on G+, it seems. But I do generally think you can then get someone to have in their head, what seems wrong and what the Bible's saying, and how the two things don't go together, and that can often be the starting point of people at least giving up the moral side of theism and saying, actually, no, I do have a responsibility to myself and to other people to develop some decent moral agency. And we don't all do it perfectly. There's plenty of times I don't. I'm not perfect, and I don't claim to be, but I hope I do as well as I can. And yeah, and it also prove God exists first. Then I might actually listen to him. But before that.
Guy, you're up, bud.
Yeah. I was just thinking, really the bottom line of what eventually propelled me out of religion was an honest evaluation of moral principles and things like that, and then reflecting back on the Bible and how it works, and ultimately I came to the decision that, or to the realization, I suppose, that what's captured in the Bible, the stories that are in there and things, they just really don't measure up to any kind of moral standard whatsoever. There's nothing there, and any critique of secular moral systems and things, maybe there are flaws, maybe we don't have things perfectly hammered out and things, but I think we've got a pretty good setup on the secular side. But then to reflect back and people say, well, you don't have absolute morals. What do you have on your side? There's really nothing there. It's just claims about good. And for a while, as a believer who was clinging to my faith tenaciously as much as I could, I took like the golden rule and I said, well, a lot of your secular moral systems are based on reciprocity, so you're really just taking from the Bible and applying that. But even that setup, even that principle, doesn't hold water when you shine the light of it on Old Testament stories and things like that. And so as I contemplated those things, really my faith just kind of fell apart because I said there's really no consistency here whatsoever, and it's all just kind of a bunch of stories, and you have to ignore the bad stuff that the God does, ignore the bad stuff the people who supposedly had God's blessing and approval did, and just say it's all good no matter what, and it doesn't make sense. So I guess I've kind of rattled on there, but that is eventually what kind of drove me out of my faith and Christianity.
All right, Potato, our friend from Finland.
Yes. I think the question is that what is the nature of intrinsic good? Is it possible that there's some that it is possible that God is intrinsically good? But I would share the opinion of philosopher. I don't know if you know this guy. It's J.L. Mackie. He argued that anything that is intrinsically good is either motivating or reason giving. But motivation itself is entirely contingent on what one happens to believe and desire, and hence no fact or requirement can motivate all by itself. And he also thinks that basically that if there's some moral fact, that it should supply overriding reason to anyone who it applies. Very Aristotelian notion, like form of the good. But I don't think such facts exist that all reasons depend on contingent facts about people's desires and interest. So basically, no consideration can supply a reason for action all by itself, and it only depends on whether it is conducive to one's ends, like Kant's hypothetical imperatives. Sorry, that was long.
It's okay.
It's okay. All right, Sarah.
Oh, okay. So for me with morality, I was raised Catholic, so you can imagine how great that was, especially with how I look. I looked like this in high school. I had really short hair, and I dressed kind of like outside of their gender norms. So you can imagine that I got a taste of Catholic morality in those days, in terms of fists and in terms of sorry, hold on a second. In terms of fists and legs, but sorry. Had to block the camera for a minute there for a nudity alert. But in terms of that, I honestly think that reciprocity is universal. I think that karma, you get what you give, especially for people, especially for everything. I think it's just I think that's the ultimate morality, and I don't think that people who use this thing even understand what cause and effect mean, because they don't really. Blah. Sorry. It just makes me mad. It just makes me mad. It just makes me mad being told that I have no morals because I don't subscribe to their Sky Daddy thing. Meanwhile, these are the same people that put down queer people like myself for being queer. Like it just drives me nuts. There's no morality in that.
We understand. It's frustrating for all of us too.
Oh yeah.
My take is much like other aspects of religion. It's basically lazy thinking. It's very lazy. Why even think about stuff when you can be told what to do, you know? And then you get into it makes no sense to me that they say they have this absolute morality when, first of all, they have to choose the right God, choose the right religion, choose the right little sect within that religion, make sure they have the right Bible, make sure they got the authors right. They have to interpret what the author was saying. They have to interpret the language, and they got 50 billion different versions of gods with different religions, and then they go, oh no, but mine's the absolute. You know, I have the absolute answer right here. So, which is, I mean, if you look at the grand scheme of things, it's like the exact definition of what, subjective is. I mean, so for me, it's completely ridiculous. I think these are people that don't really subscribe to a lot of critical thinking in and of themselves. So I think it's just a way for them to really not have to, they want to, a part of them, at least in my opinion, wants to live life on rails, and just kind of be directed. And it's because it's really scary when you step away from that. It can be really scary. And there are some people that marry themselves to, let's say, their political party. So, in this country, for example, if you say something and it's against Republicans, and they will get really personally offended, and you try to tell them, are you defining yourself by your political party? A lot of people define themselves by their religion, and I pretty much was able to separate that. So, in essence, over time, it was easy, much like Gavagai, it was easy for me to sort of to take a look at it critically and then just go, yeah, this is kind of bullshit, so I'm out. But anyway.
If anybody came up to me and said, hey, whose morality do you doubt more, a theist or an atheist? I'm like, a theist.
So, we've reached pretty much the end of the show. Fox,
Thank you for having me.
Potato, what do you guys think about next week?
I have no idea what the topic will be.
Cupcakes.
But maybe we should run let people suggest one.
What?
Sorry?
Maybe people could suggest. Sorry, maybe people could suggest a topic and then we could go.
Yeah,
with
that's kind of what I was thinking, but when I
anyone
put
actually
it out there,
watches.
I didn't get any responses. So
What about, I have one. What about, say if you were born in a religion, or if you were indoctrinated into a religion, what rituals do you miss? If you miss any. That would be an interesting topic.
yeah, I could say 0, and that would be.
That I could.
Oh man.
Yeah, okay, you win. Cupcakes it is.
Struggle with that one.
But thank you very much for inviting me. This
Oh,
was so fun.
oh, no problem.
I hope to come back soon again.
Lloyd, thanks for showing up too, by the way.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Anytime you need me, just call me.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you'll see the invite go up probably in the middle of the week. We joked last week that Gavagai was like the famous guy of the panel, and like you're right up there with him. Like you guys,
No.
yeah,
I'm not famous.
Stars.
yeah.
And that's a lot longer than I have.
I'm not famous. I'm like a tiny little bug.
It makes us all seem legitimate and stuff, So, but yeah, we'll definitely we'll try to use that Google Docs thing that Gavagai sent, and we'll come up with a topic for next week.
Sweet.
If you guys know anyone that wants to come on, a theist or otherwise, let us know. We'll try to be friendly. No, we're generally friendly, polite people, and I would.
You are.
I would say that out of all of us, I'm probably the worst one. So. But I think everyone else is pretty reasonable.
Depends who I'm talking to.
That's true.
Just don't bring J-Man into this conference.
No, that's probably not going to happen.
No, I would never have G-Man. It don't sound like a diva now, but I'm making demands. But I demand never to have G-Man anywhere near me. The guy is an idiot. He's a narcissist.
I concur. He's awful.
He's weaponized ignorance. I've said it before. The man is weaponized ignorance. He's like a scud missile of stupidity.
Agreed.
And I wouldn't want anything to do with him. You can't have a good conversation with the man. He just talks over everybody. He's rude.
Yeah.
There's no point engaging with him. I know it's kind of funny to watch. I do. I sometimes get the popcorn and I'll listen for 10 minutes if I can last that long. But
yeah.
Hopefully there are a lot smarter theists out there who can do a far better job than G-Man, and they should be pushing him down and saying that no, he doesn't speak for us.
Yeah. Like Andy Jack.
Yeah. But anyone who's not G-Man is welcome.
Yeah.
That's not being racist at all.
I mean, I mentioned last week I'm blocked by Arcane Logos, and I hate that guy to death.
Oh God, yeah.
Take it as a compliment.
I hate him like Hitler. But
I've got the Arcane Logos challenge that every time he kind of waffles on. I posed a challenge to him that he never responds to. So if he came on and he started spouting his "is that your opinion" stuff, then I would just put it in the chat for him and ask him if he'd like to respond to it.
That's the only time I think I may actually lose it, is if I actually got to speak to him, like, on a Google thing. But generally speaking, I'm okay. Like, I can even handle, or him and maybe Matt Slick. But, I mean, not that I would ever want to speak to him, but, you get the idea.
Also,
Alright,
pretty much destroyed the whole opinion thing.
What was that?
Ozymandias, he destroyed the whole opinion thing that Arcane said. I don't know if you saw the post.
Ozzy destroys anyone that he wants.
I think
That's
the problem
true.
with Arcane is he just regularly gets destroyed, but he had nothing to begin with, and how did he destroy nothing? I think is his particular view on it. He started with nothing, he still got nothing. So.
Do you know why Arcane blocked me the second time? Was because he had me unblocked, and then he posted a comment, and I said, I told him, like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take my science education from someone that thinks birds fly by farting, and he just blocked me immediately after that.
I forgot he said that.
And I know this wasn't one of those well thought out, like, logical responses, but I felt I had to say it.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sorry, I forgot he had said that.
Yeah, you guys know about that, right?
Yes.
Fox, you know about that? Okay, all right.
Yeah, say that. I think he's right.
It was just pretty funny.
Yeah,
But anyway. All right. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up. Again, we'll hit it up during the week for new topics. I'm glad everyone came. Thank you, Floyd. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.
Of course, thanks to our panel, Gavagai, Fox, and Potato. Which, when he enters the room, if you're in, you got to go Potato, because that's like. All right, guys. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Peace out.
Everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.